everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be talking about the best thriller books for beginners. I get a lot of people asking me for thriller book recommendations for people who are new to the genre, either because they themselves are, or I guess they're just looking for it for a friend. So I figured it'd be a good time to put a video together of all of my recommendations for people who are just getting started into the thriller genre. If you're not typically a thriller reader or not even a reader at all, these are the books that I would recommend for the people who are ready to dip their toes in the waters of thrillers. So I've broken these recommendations up in a couple different ways, a couple different groupings of themes or ways I would recommend books to beginners depending on what you've read in the past or what kind of things you're looking for in a thriller book. So I'm just gonna jump on into those and we'll get started. My first grouping of recommendations are for people who don't really read at all and you're looking to just pick up a thriller book, you're not a huge reader, you don't want something overly complicated, and you just wanna have a good time with a thriller. For these, I would more generally recommend a couple authors that I think are good to check out if you're new to reading and new to the genre. The first one is Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware is said to be like the Agatha Christie of our times with the types of mysteries and thrillers that she writes. All her books are very tropey. They very much follow a specific trope, whether that's the isolation trope or mistaken identity or going on a boat and thinking you see a crime happen or things happening at a hen do, bringing things together from the past and the present. She's done a lot of different things in her books, so I think she's a really good place to get started. Her books also just tend to not be overly complicated. I feel like they're very accessible. So these are all of the books that Ruth Ware has come out with so far. A couple of the ones that have been my standout favorites from Ruth Ware, I've read every single thing that she's published so far, and my favorites have been The Death of Mrs. Westaway and The Turn of the Key. You don't have to read her books in any particular order. They're all completely separate stories, so just read the synopses of them, check them out, and see if any of them strike your fancy. And then if you do like them, you have a good amount of her backlist books that you can check out as well. Another author that I would recommend for people who are new to reading and new to the thriller genre is Riley Sager. Riley Sager has a couple books out so far, and pretty much for all of them, they are inspired from classic horror or thriller stories. So they're stories that feel familiar. Similar to Ruth Ware's books, they're very tropey, so they're typical things that you'll see as a pattern in the genre. I think that's good too, to check out these authors that write a lot of different tropes, because then you can kind of begin to figure out what it is that you like in thrillers and what you don't like, and then that'll help you figure out other recommendations that you should look for by looking for more books along those tropes. These are all the books that Riley Sager has come out with so far. I've read all of them except for The Last Time I Lied, and my personal favorite is Lock Every Door. A couple other recommendations I have for people who don't really read at all are to read really fast-paced or really gripping thrillers. So one that I pretty much recommend to anyone just looking for a book to pick up is No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a really fun, fast-paced thriller book that is really well loved by people who are new to the genre and people who have read a million thriller books in their time. Also, there is a Hulu movie adaptation that is coming out this coming week from when I'm filming this, so it might even be live by the time this video comes out. That could also be fun to pair a reading with a movie experience. This is a story about this woman who is trapped at this rest stop in a snowstorm with a group of potentially dangerous people, and she has to try to survive the night. It's full of action, you can't put it down, and it is just so much fun. Another one I would recommend, although this one might be a little bit overwhelming for someone who's new to the genre, is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This book is very gruesome. There are a lot of content warnings for this book. It is very filled with gore and just like really gross things happening to people. So if that's not your style, then I definitely would not recommend this for you, but it is a very addictive read. It is very fast paced. It's more of an action style thriller and it's just written really well. So I really enjoyed that one. But if you don't like really intense, brutal stuff, then would not recommend this one to you. If you do want to pick this up, however, it is a story about these two sisters who have been estranged for a very long time because they had another sister who went missing long ago, and ever since that they've been estranged from one another. But then something happens in their present day that seems like it might be connected to what was going on in the past, and that brings the two sisters back together to try to untangle the mystery of what happened in their past and what's going on right now. That's all I really want to say about it. I don't want to spoil anything about the story for you because it is just such an exciting, fast-paced read. But if you can handle some brutal, gory action, then I would definitely recommend picking this one up. And then finally, just a general recommendation for people who don't really read much and are looking to get get into thrillers, and this is not a sponsored kind of plug, this is me just generally recommending this to you, is to check out Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a monthly book subscription service. They pick 5 books each month that are the books of the month. Usually there's at least one thriller in that, and you can pick which book you want to be your book of the month. It's like $10 to $15 a month. You can also choose to get add-ons if you want to pay extra for that, but they generally have a pretty good mix of thriller books that would be really good for beginners. Maybe you don't even want to try out the subscription, you just want to look to see what they've done in the past, to look for some recommendations, but they typically feature authors like Alex Michaelides, Alice Feeney, Sherry Lapina. They do Riley Sager and Ruth Ware's stuff as well. Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, Rachel Hawkins. Those are all just the authors that immediately come to mind, but those books typically tend to have a very wide appeal. I think they're really good for seasoned thriller readers, but also especially good for people who are beginners to the genre. Again, not sponsored at all. That is just my genuine opinion. I think they do a good job of selecting thriller books for people who would be new to the genre. If you do decide that you want to give the service a go though, I do have a referral code down in my description box down below that you can use to sign up to try out Book of the Month for the first time. I probably get something in exchange for it. I don't know what it is, but feel free to do that if you so choose. The next category I have for people looking to get into thrillers are for people who typically read romance books. If you're trying to bridge the gap from enjoying romance books to enjoying thrillers, I think that's a really easy entry point into the genre because there are so many thriller books with romantic elements or just domestic thrillers in general that follow things going on between a husband and a wife or people dating. So I think there's a really natural way for romance readers to come into the thriller genre. I used to read a lot of romance before I read a lot of thrillers, and so I kind of had that similar pathway into the genre. So here's a couple recommendations for people who primarily read romance now and are wanting to give thrillers a try. First, I would recommend The Swap by Robin Harding. I've heard in general that Robin Harding is just good for people who are new to thrillers. I've only read 2 things from Robin Harding so far. I read The Swap and then I read The Perfect Family, and I would say that both of those are pretty good for beginners, but The Swap in particular is pretty good for people who are coming in from a romance background. This is a story about these 2 couples who decide to swap partners, and it basically upends their lives. It's really psychological, really twisty. There's also an element of obsession going on in the story because one of the women has this teenage girl who's also obsessed with her, and then that comes into the mess and makes things super messy, and it's just a ton of fun. Next up, sort of similar, I would recommend The Arrangement by Kirsten Moglen. This is a story I just recently read. It's a really short book. It's probably just around 250 pages, so it's also good for just a really quick read. And this is a story about this married couple who are looking to spice things up, and so they decide that they're going to start seeing other people one night a week. So they get on dating apps. The wife is going to go out with people on Tuesdays, the husband's going to go out with people on Thursdays, and the rule is that they can't tell their partner about who they're seeing, anything about them. It's just supposed to be this like secretive thing that makes them bring the spark back into their marriage. But things very quickly go wrong in that arrangement, and it is just such a fun book. It's really short, so I don't want to tell you any more about that. It's got some great twists in it. It's very centered and focused on the relationship between this couple, so it's really good for people who want to see things going on in relationships and marriages. And I think the ending twist would be even more exciting for someone who doesn't typically read a lot of thrillers and doesn't really know what to expect. I think this one would really blow you away. So definitely one that I would recommend to people who love the romance stuff and want to get into thrillers. Finally, one more I'd recommend, and I recommend this book all the time because I think it's just such a fun thriller, and that is Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is a story about this woman named Verity who was a very successful author. She is now in a condition where she can no longer write, and she has this series of books that is incomplete, and so her husband's been taking care of her, and he wants to hire a ghostwriter to come in, go through Verity's notes, and be able to ghostwrite the rest of the series so that they can be completed. So he does that. He ends up hiring this woman named Lowen. She comes into the house, she starts going through the notes, but she starts finding some things that seem to be more autobiographical and that document some secrets and some dark stuff that has been going on in that family, and she gets really enmeshed in their relationship. She starts having feelings for the husband, but then she's finding out all these terrible things about the wife, and it is just a wild ride. It is so much fun. Even if you're a seasoned thriller reader, I think this one's a ton of fun to read, but especially if you're new to the genre and coming from romance, this is one that I highly recommend. The next grouping of books that I have to recommend are for people who like to read literary fiction or are just generally interested in well-written books, like where the prose is just really nice. There's so many thrillers that don't focus a lot on the detail of the writing because it's more about the entertainment of the story, which I enjoy both of those things equally. I like really well written, drawn out mystery thrillers, and I like the stuff where it's like just dialogue thrown on a page and it's really exciting and entertaining. I think both are great, but this category includes some thriller books that I think will be good for people who really want something that feels similar to a literary fiction story but has some thrilling or mystery elements in the story as well. The first one I have to recommend is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This is a story about a group of friends from college who are being brought back together at their college reunion. Back when they were in school, one of their friends was murdered, one of them was accused for it, but now in the present day at the reunion, as they're all coming back together, someone thinks that they might have gotten the murderer wrong, and you're piecing together the mystery of who did murder one of their friends. This one's really well done. You're following multiple points in time as the friends were in college and in present day. You follow multiple different perspectives throughout the story and are trying to piece together the whole puzzle of what really happened to the friend group. It has an academic setting. They're all really pretentious and just want to be seen as successful. So there's also some really great character work done in this story, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who likes a good literary style. Next up, one of my personal favorites that I recommend all the time is Who is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. This is a story about this woman who gets the opportunity to write for this very prestigious, well-known author named Maud Dixon, but Maud Dixon is their pen name and no one knows anything about the person behind the name. They're this very mysterious, successful author, and so the main character is super excited to get the chance to go work with Maud Dixon and get that mentorship in the publishing world. But once the main character does meet Maud Dixon and gets to know them and see what their life is all about, they end up getting pulled into some chaos. And that's really all I like to say about this one. I don't think you should read the synopsis before going into it. I think you should just go on the ride, see what happens with these characters. It's super well written. It's a slower paced one, but it's so rewarding by the end of it. Next up, we have A Good Marriage by Kimberly McCreight. In this story, you're following Lizzie, who is a lawyer, and her marriage is a little bit on the rocks. She ends up getting a call from an old friend who is in a sticky situation because his wife has just been murdered and he's looking pretty guilty, and he's calling Lizzie up for help. And then that begins to cause the unraveling of a lot of secrets between him and his wife's marriage, and then also Lizzie and her marriage. So this is more of a slow burn. You've got multiple POVs you're following. It is definitely more literary in the way it is pieced together, but I still had a really good time with this one. I think it'd be great for someone who really likes the literary style of writing and wants some mysteries and some thrills and some reveals in there as well. Next up, we have Ghosts of Harvard by Francesca Saratella. This one is more of a mystery, but it definitely still has thriller feels. There's like a thin line between mysteries and thrillers most of the time. But in this one, you're following this girl whose brother previously had went to Harvard. When he was there, he developed schizophrenia and he ended up committing suicide. Now she wants to go to Harvard herself to retrace his footsteps and try to piece together the truth of what really happened to him, because she's having trouble accepting that that's the whole story. This one is really beautifully written. It has grief weaved through the narrative so well. It's such a great portrayal of grief. It's also a slow burn. There's also a lot of focus put into building the characters and really just crafting the whole narrative in this one. Plus, as the title suggests, there are ghosts in this story. So if you're looking for something that also sort of borders on the horror with a little bit of supernatural stuff in it, then this would be the perfect place to go. And then finally, I would recommend The Plot by Jean Homp Corlitz. This is a story about this professor who was a successful author in his past, but he hasn't really been able to write anything great since then. So he's decided to just start teaching creative writing classes. He ends up encountering this student who is very cocky and says that he has this brilliant idea for a plot of a book that is going to be a bestseller. It's going to be so successful. It doesn't even matter if he writes it well because the plot is so enticing and it's going to be so great. And so the professor gets really annoyed with that, but he just brushes it off. He's like, whatever, won't think much about it. And then years pass and he decides to check in to see if the guy ever did write that story. And it turns out that he has died. And so the professor decides to steal that story idea and make it his own. And it does end up becoming super successful. It does blow up and get optioned for a film, and it's this huge bestseller that everyone knows about. And then he starts getting notes from someone saying that they know that that's not really his story and that he stole it from someone. Meanwhile, you also get pieces of the story that he wrote weaved throughout the narrative as well. So you're also trying to kind of figure out what is the major cool thing in the plot that was so exciting to people in the story. Definitely a slow burn, definitely one that's super well written, so perfectly fits in this category. I was also thinking about people who may primarily read horror and they're looking to come into the thriller genre because they like the spooky things, but they want more twists and reveals and surprises. And the two books that I thought of for those types of people are from the same author, thriller, and that is Alex North. For these people, I would recommend The Shadows and The Whisper Man. Both of these books follow an adult in their present day and in the past, and it's stories of piecing together what happened in the past and how that's connected to the present. They're both really spooky and they've got creepy moments. There's a serial killer in The Whisper Man, a copycat murder situation going on, and then in The Shadows, it's about what happened to this guy when he was with his group of friends as a kid, and they used to get into lucid dreaming, and there's some spooky things happening in the forest. So both of these have really good borderline horror feel, but they're definitely thrillers. So I would definitely recommend them to people who are looking to jump into thrillers from the horror genre. Lastly, I wanted to include some YA thriller recommendations. So whether you're new to the genre, new to reading, or if you just really like young adult books, these are ones that I think would be good for beginners to the thriller genre. The first one is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. This is more of an action-y thriller that is set at a bank heist, and you're following this group of teenagers. One is this girl who grew up with a con artist mother, and so she has a very interesting background, and she has been many different girls in her past. Along with her is her new girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend, who just found out that she has moved on with this girlfriend, and they all used to be friends. And so there's a lot of teen angst and love triangle drama going on all in the meantime, but they get stuck in this bank together during a robbery and then have to try to make it out alive while they're also dealing with all these just teenage drama issues. And then the second YA thriller I would recommend is The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. In this story, you're following this group of cousins who don't really have a relationship with one another. Their family has been pretty disjointed because all of the parents have had this estranged relationship with the grandma, and the grandma now lives and works on this luxury resort out in the middle of nowhere, and she has invited all of the cousins to come to the resort for the summer and work there. And all the parents really want the kids to do that because they want to get back in her good graces before she dies so they can get themselves back in the will. And so they all go, and once they get there, they learn all about all the secrets in their family history, and it's just really fun. It's really twisty. It's really well done. And it's really gripping for a YA thriller. Even if you're an adult and you don't typically read YA, it's one I would definitely recommend. So that is it for all the recommendations that I have for thriller books for beginners. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any other recommendations that you think would be good for beginners. So if people are coming to this video, they can check out the comments for even more ideas. I've been reading thrillers for so many years now that it's kind of hard for me to remember what I was feeling like the first time I was reading thrillers. So let me know if you have any other prompts or questions or ways that you would find useful for getting recommendations, and I could maybe even do another version of this in the future. If you've made it to the end of today's video and you want to leave an emoji in the comments to show that you made it to the end, or if you just don't know what else to comment, then today's emoji is going to be the magnifying glass. Kind of aligns with thrillers, usually more mysteries or detective stuff, which I didn't hit on a ton today, but we're just gonna go with the magnifying glass. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.